Isn't it true that everyone sees their own child as extraordinary? Even the smallest movement excites parents. Everyone loves to believe their child is smarter than their peers, maybe even gifted. But let me tell you a story. The story of an extraordinary horse. At the end of the 19th century, a man named William von Austin claimed that the horse he owned was highly intelligent, and that animals could learn just like humans. After failing with several other animals, he finally succeeded with a horse he named Hans. Known as Clever Hans, this horse answered 90% of the questions asked to him correctly. And they weren't simple questions. Hans could add, subtract, divide, and perform other calculations. When asked for the current time or date, he tapped his front hoof on the ground and gave the exact correct answer. He could even read and understand written questions in German. Hans became a phenomenon of his time. People traveled from all over the country just to see him. Naturally, the scientific community became interested as well. Scientists, with their skepticism, believed there had to be a trick behind all of this. Some kind of deception. Surely there had to be. Right? But there wasn't. Countless scientists and experts examined Hans and found no sign of cheating. Even when von Austin wasn't present, the horse continued to answer questions with remarkable accuracy. Everyone began to believe that Hans truly was a genius. But then, a psychologist named Oscar Pfungst noticed something strange. First, Hans couldn't answer any questions when he wore blinders or when a curtain was placed between him and the questioner. Second, the horse could answer only when the person asking the question knew the answer themselves. Based on these observations, Pfungst concluded, Hans wasn't showing any real intelligence. He wasn't actually calculating anything. But this didn't mean von Austin had been tricking people. What was happening was this: Hans had learned to read body language with extraordinary accuracy. Think about the techniques used by the best poker players in the world. Even when trying to keep a poker face, if someone gets a great hand, some tiny reaction inevitably appears. A twitch in a facial muscle, a blink, a micro-movement, something. That's why professional players wear hats and sunglasses. Hans, essentially, was a master poker player. He could read the smallest cue. For example, if Hans was asked the sum of 3 and 5, he started tapping his hoof. When he reached 8, the person unconsciously made a tiny movement, a blink, a nod, a change in posture. Hans detected that cue and stopped tapping. That's why he failed when there was a curtain. He simply couldn't see the cue. When von Austin died in 1909, the Clever Hans phenomenon came to an end. Now, Hans's remarkable ability deserves recognition. But for us, the real importance lies in the profound impact this case left on the field of psychology. Over the years, psychologists began studying what expectations truly mean. In the Hans case, when the owner asked him a question, believing he could answer, truly expecting him to succeed, von Austin unknowingly gave subtle cues. This raised an important question: do our expectations influence other people's success? After countless studies, the answer became clear. Yes. And this phenomenon was given a name: the self-fulfilling prophecy, or more commonly, the Pygmalion Effect. Before diving deeper into this, let's look at where the name comes from. Pygmalion is an ancient Greek myth about a sculptor who falls in love with the marble woman he carved. Unable to love a real person, he prays to Aphrodite, and the statue transforms into a living woman. His obsession and his expectation brings the statue to life. This story became a metaphor for expectations turning into reality. Its opposite is the Golem effect, where low expectations lead to poor performance. Now back to the Pygmalion effect. We see it everywhere: schools, workplaces, and families. When we understand this effect clearly, we can better analyze and guide our children, friends, employees, or even leaders. One of the first to discuss it was sociologist Robert Merton, who defined self-fulfilling prophecies in 1948 as beliefs that become true over time. But philosophers and psychologists noticed this long before. Jacques Bossuet in the 17th century said, "The greatest weakness is the fear of appearing weak." Freud also hinted at it. A child who grows up feeling like the most valued in the family often carries this feeling through life, and most successful people share this story. But the most important study came later, in 1968, by Robert Rosenthal and Lenore Jacobson, one of the most cited studies in the history of psychology. They tested students in an elementary school. Teachers were told that 20% of the students were high potential, gifted learners. They were given the names of these students. But here's the twist: these children were chosen completely at random. Their test scores were not exceptional. The only difference was the teacher's expectations. At the end of the year, IQ tests were repeated. All students improved, but those labeled as gifted showed dramatic increases. Another study is even more shocking. Rosenthal first ran a similar experiment with lab rats. Students were told one group of rats was highly intelligent and the other group was slow learners. In reality, the rats were randomly assigned. But the smart rats performed far better. You know why? Because students handled them with more care, patience, belief, and this changed outcomes. Rosenthal later observed that teachers unknowingly treated the gifted children differently. They acted warmer and friendlier toward them. They gave them more time and guidance. They allowed them to speak more during class. They offered more constructive feedback. All of this happened unconsciously. This effect is everywhere. In workplaces, managers assign more responsibility and opportunities to employees they believe have higher potential, creating a positive feedback loop. In families, children grow into the expectations set for them, both positive and negative. The Pygmalion Effect teaches us that reality is subjective. It is shaped by our families, friends, bosses, and society. Our achievements, perspectives, behaviors, and self-image depend heavily on the expectations placed upon us. But we must also note, this effect does not mean everyone can do everything. Unrealistic expectations can cause stress and failure. And balanced expectations are key. At its core, the Pygmalion Effect is not mystical or self-help nonsense. It shows that when we see someone's potential, whether a child, a student, or an employee, and support them, we can help them reach their true capability. As Carl Sagan said, the goals we set for our children shape the future. Positive expectations can become self-fulfilling prophecies. Dreams are like maps. The Pygmalion Effect is like a hidden superpower. Who wouldn't want their child, or their team, or their leaders, to succeed? We don't even need to intervene directly. By simply raising expectations, for ourselves and others, we can unlock outcomes we never imagined. Without realizing it, we can push ourselves and others toward success. Raise your expectations. Set harder goals. With positive expectations and a positive perspective, you begin searching for evidence to prove that success is possible, and eventually, those expectations turn into reality. Until we meet again, I'm glad you're here. Don't forget to subscribe.